All right, so we've done piecewise functions by hand. Today we're going to look at doing them on the graphing calculator. We're going to start on the screen where you graph everything in the Y equals menu. So your Y equals button is here. Press that button and make sure that everything's cleared out and that we don't have boxes around anything at the top. So it should just be all clear and open and ready to graph. If we're putting these in, you're going to use a lot of parentheses. Your parentheses keys are above the 8 and the 9. Some of our older calculators, these have worn off. You can't tell, but above the 8 is the open parentheses, above the 9 is the closed parentheses. So that's where I'm getting those. You're going to put this first part of the function in parentheses. So I'm going to do parentheses, x plus 3, close parentheses. So I'm going to wait and let you get that part in there, because we're going to have to go to a different screen to get the less than or equal to part. So they don't really have an if in here. We're going to do another set of parentheses. You're going to hit your X key. By the way, remember, you can get X by just pushing this button right here. You do not have to use alpha keys. And then to get less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, we have to go into our math menu. So here's your math key over here. You press math, and then... oh, I'm sorry, I wanted second math. So, second and math key. We're actually in the test menu. They call it testing because they're seeing if it's less than, greater than, whatever. And so since we want the less than or equal to, that is down on number 6. And we copy it out of there. And then you can put in the 2 and close the parentheses. So both this part and this part goes in parentheses. And then in theory, it will know what to do with that when we graph. Then we go down to the second line and do the same thing. So we're going to have x minus 1 in parentheses. In the other parentheses, we're going to have x. I'm going to stop and let you guys catch up to where I'm at, and then I'll show you again how to get to that greater than symbol. And then we'll write out some steps on the paper after we graph so that we have that in there. All right, so you don't want to use the math key. You want to use the test menu, which is second, and then the math key. And so greater than is option number 3, and we can copy that over and then put in number 2 and close parentheses. So then if you have a good graphing window, you could just hit graph. If not, you can do zoom and choose number 6. And mine does something weird with the colors that doesn't really show up on yours, so it's not a big deal. I have these 2 pieces of my lines right here. And I could use these to draw a pretty good graph, but I need to pay attention to where my endpoints are and what the slope is and all of that. So this first one, this endpoint is up here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. So 2, 5, I'm just going to kind of put a little point, and then the next point is at 2, 1 down here, and I need to know which one of these we're going to fill in, because they can't both be filled in, then it's not a function. So if we look, this first graph is x plus 3. That's the one that I have in blue. So that's this one, and it has the equal to bar, so this one gets filled in, that one gets left open. And then we do need to still understand a little bit about slope. This is just a slope of 1 for both of them. So we're going to fill in some points back this way with a slope of 1 and draw our arrow showing it goes forever. If it's going off the screen, it keeps going. And then this one also has a slope of 1, so we'll go up and put a couple of points there and go this way. If you don't want to think about slope, you could use your table feature, second table, and get some of the points. It's going to do a weird thing. It's going to have, the first graph is going to be everything from 2 down. So here it's got 2, 5, 1, 4, 0, 3, all of that. And then once you get to 2, it just starts putting in zeros for everything. And the numbers over here start to pick up. And it picks up at 3, 2. It won't tell you where to put this little 0 here. So it's not my favorite way to do piecewise functions because you still have to do an awful lot of thinking and know how they work. But if you had to do something that had several pieces, you might be able to use this just to check and see if your lines are in the right place. I think of this as more of a tool for checking. All right, so in the notebook, let's write out what our steps are just for this first one. So you hit the y equals key. I like to put boxes around things that are keys. In the y1, we put x plus 3 in parentheses, and x is less than or equal to 2 in parentheses. In the y2 line, we put the x minus 1 in parentheses, x is greater than 2 in parentheses. And then to get the less than, greater than stuff, you hit the second key, and then the math key, which has test above it. And that's where you're going to get all those symbols, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. And so this would be a good tool just to check and make sure that your graphs are great, but I don't know that it's going to be super great at writing a graph and making a graph from scratch.
Do you have water?
You got that? You can't say that anymore.
All right, so let's go to the next problem. So I don't have this one written in. We'll write this in really quick. So I'm going to say f of x equals, make my bracket, negative 1/4 x plus 3 if negative 4 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 4, and 3/4 x minus 1 if 4 is less than or equal to x is less than 6. So we're going to have some that are segments on this one. So on this one, it is going to be a little bit different because instead of going off forever and having arrows, we are going to get segments. So give you guys a second to write this down. I'm going to get my calculator ready by just clearing out everything that's in there. And then all of this goes into parentheses, but we're going to talk about the fractions a little bit. So you need to have parentheses, and then to put a negative 1/4, I would also put that in parentheses. Negative 1 divided by 4, close parentheses, x plus 3 like this. And then you have your open parentheses. Oh, so you have to do this in 2 pieces, and it's a pain in the butt, and I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. So you can't put all 3 of these things in the same parentheses. I have to do negative 4 is less than or equal to x first. So I'm going to go into my second test, less than or equal to x, and close the parentheses. And then I open another parentheses and put x is less than or equal to 4. So you have to break this apart and put x in both of them. It's just how the calculators are programmed. I'm just going to check and make sure. So you put all of that in parentheses, this in parentheses, this in parentheses. It's a little bit crazy. And then if you hit graph, it should show up as just a little segment. So how are we doing on typing it in? Okay. So it should be a little segment from negative 4 over to here to 4. We know it's negative 4 to 4. We also know both endpoints are filled in because we have little equal to symbols here. So you just need to figure out how high they are. You can use the trace feature. This is hitting the y-axis at 0, 3, and we can kind of go out to the endpoint here if you really want to. So it's negative 4, 4 it's looking like. And then if we go all the way to the other end, we can kind of get that point, sort of, kind of. And it's looking like 4, 2. If you go right out to the end point, it is going to drop down to somewhere else. It's going to drop off. So it's about 4, 2. And we know both of those are filled in because of the symbols, and we can just connect all of that up. Or you can just look at it and count. This looks like negative 4, 4 and 4, 2. You can just look at the graph and try to figure that out. You can use the table. If you do go into the table, we just have this first part. It doesn't have anything past negative 4. It's just going to tell you that's all 0. The calculator does that and actually graphs a bunch of points on the x-axis that you can't see. And then it tells you it's negative 4, 4 and gives you a whole bunch of points. And then it goes up to 4, 2, and then it just sort of stops and tells you it's all 0. It doesn't actually connect to 0. That's just how they programmed it to make it work. Okay, so if we go back to our y equals menu, we can put in the second one. So in the first parentheses, we're going to do parentheses for the equation, parentheses for the 3/4, and then x, and then -1, close parentheses. So that's all this part of the problem right here. And then we have to break this into two pieces. You're going to have the 4 is less than or equal to x, and then x is less than 6. It requires it that way. It's just how it works. So we have 4, and then less than or equal to x, close parentheses, and then x. It's just less than 6. So this is what it'll look like on the calculator. It is a little bizarre that you have to do 3 sets of parentheses, but it just has to do with the programming. Being able to do these extras, I think, was an added on to graphing calculators later after the original graphing calculators were made, so they had to find a way to add it in without changing all of the programming. All right, so if we hit graph, that second piece should show up, and it's right there, so it connects to this end piece. And looks like it goes up to 6, 4 maybe. Let's look at the table. So actually at 6 it drops off because just go back and look at the graph. So it's looking like 6, 4 to me, like that. Oh, and this is an open circle, which is why it wasn't showing up on the table, because it's not included. Okie doke. So there's that point. So really quickly on the notebooks, I'm just going to write out the steps because we are missing some personas. So in the y one, we did parentheses, -1 divided by 4, like this. And then we did -4 is less than or equal to x. And x is less than or equal to 4. On the y2, we did 3/4 x minus 1. 4 is less than or equal to x. X is less than 6. Like I said, this is more for checking your work than it is to straight up do it, but that's okay. For our third example, we're going to add in a new element. So take a moment if you want to have this in your notes to write this down and make that look a little bit more like it actually does in the calculator. And then we'll go on to the next page and write down one more problem. We're going to use part of a parabola and part of a line in the same problem. Okay? So over on our other page, I'm going to call it f of x equals, so the top line is going to be x squared plus 4 if x is less than 0. For the second line, it's 2x minus 1 if x is greater than or equal to 0. So this part right here is going to be a piece of a parabola. So we should know that that's going to be curved a little bit. We know what parabolas look like. They're that little U-y shape. We're going to have part of one. And then this one is going to be a piece of a line. You can actually, some people get creative and they actually draw pictures by doing a lot of these on the same graph. I've often done that as a project, but I don't know if we're going to have time this year because we've had a lot of days out. All right, so on the calculator, in the y equals menu, I've cleared everything out. I'm going to put the first part of the equation in parentheses, x squared plus 4. In the second parentheses, we'll just put x. And then second math key, go down and find less than, it's option number 5, and then 0. And then for the second equation, it's just 2x minus 1 if x is greater than or equal to 0. So it'll look like that. All right, so then if you hit your graph key, if you've still got a good window going on, you're going to get, this is like half of a parabola up to the y-axis, and then you're going to have a line starting down here and going up. Let's use the table to get some of our points. So if I go second, table, I'm going to go back to the left of the x, or the y-axis, I'm sorry, and get a few points. So I can see for sure I have -1, 5. I can see for sure that I have -2, 8. And then -3, 13, I might be able to split 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's right at the top of this of the graph, the way that I have mine turned. If your paper's turned differently. And then it doesn't tell us where it hits the x-axis, but we can go back to the graph and see where it hits. It's hitting at 4, which is what the +4 in that equation does. So that's pretty cool. And this is going to be an open dot right here at 0, 4. And then we can connect these up to make sort of the rounded half parabola, and then there would be an arrow showing that that keeps going. So it's just slightly rounded. It's not quite a straight line. And then the next piece is a line that starts at 0, -1. We can see that, and that one is filled in because we've got the equal to bar. And then we can use the table to find a few more pieces. So 0, -1 is on there. 1, 1 is on there. So if you're using your table, you're going to start ignoring the y1 numbers and use your y2 numbers. So 1, 1 is on there. 2, 3 is on there. 3, 5 is on there. So it's going to look like that. And we can draw our arrow showing that that keeps going after that point.